the financial status of the fire district. Just as a matter of record, because I'll refer to this later on, we take these percentages from the Division of Finance based upon property tax supported funds. The fire district is one of these. We have all of these other tax supported funds as well that we look at. And I know I'm introducing or talking about a concept that all of you are intimately familiar with. We have certain property tax supported funds. The legislature gives us this right, and we impose it itself, that has funds, portions of the ad valorem tax that is specifically dedicated to certain governmental purposes. The county general fund obviously is the big one, but we also have dedicated property tax supported funds for Wichita State, to operate our ComCare department, for EMS, and some other departments as well. All of these have been factored into measuring the accuracy of our finance department in the past about how their projections have been made. So we've got credibility on these numbers based upon how accurate we have been in the past. Now, we come to the conclusion then. We've got a serious financial problem. We've seen the implications even of both proposals on what the financial situation is going to be in the future. We then get to the next issue. All right, do we have another source of revenue? And here we have heated difference between the bargaining unit and the county, specifically the legal department, about what latitude we have in dipping into the casino. And this is the second reason why I think the fact finder came to a bad conclusion, because when she says that what the bargaining unit is proposing in the way of increases, what she recommends is affordable, it all funnels in to the assumption that we'll be able to tap into casino monies. We think that's legally impermissible. I respect Mr. Bucati a lot. We were in law school at the same time, very distinguished attorney, and I believe him when he says he can read a statute. But we think we have attorneys in our office can read a statute too, and we don't think you can take casino monies and dedicate that for the fire district purpose. And we best base that in 3 steps. First one, what is a fire district? A fire district is technically a different governmental body than the county. We have people probably even in this room that doesn't realize it is actually a different governmental entity. You all are the governing body of the fire district, but it actually exists as a different legal governmental entity than Sedgwick County does as a whole. It has its own taxing authority. It is not only its own governmental body, it has its own taxing authority. That's why it can impose a tax through whatever decisions you all make as a governing body to determine how much of the county taxes out in the fire district go to fire purposes. It has its own taxing authority, and it is its own fund. The second thing, KSA 79-2934 says this, that it prohibits transfer of funds unless specifically provided by law. No part of any fund shall be diverted to any other fund except as provided by law. Now, what's that mean? I told you about all these funds that we have out there, including the fire district. Every one of them has a little bit of a piece of the ad valorem taxes that go on them. By statute, we cannot take, for example, ComCare money and put it into fire district number 1 money. We cannot take Wichita State money. We cannot take those taxes that have been dedicated for that purpose and put it into another fund. We have a state law that says you cannot do this. We have a county general fund, and any revenues that go into that cannot be transferred to the Fire District 1 general fund, or it's against the law. And our position is this makes no difference, because when it says no part of any fund, that means if money goes into Sedgwick County, regardless of whether it is actually tax money or it's some other revenue source, it cannot be transferred to another fund that is established and recognized by statute. And then we get to the third reason why that's not true, and that is when we talk about the gaming statute. The way that we ended up getting some of the casino money, getting a piece of the casino money, just didn't because it grew on a tree. There was legislative action that specifically says when a casino operates in a particular county that there are other governmental entities that get some money out of that. The gaming statute says specifically that if you have a casino in a county or in a city, that city gets 1% of the revenue, and the adjoining county and the county that city is in gets 1% as well. If the casino is not within the borders of a city, the county that the casino is, it gets 2%. Now, the casino we're talking about here is near Mulvane. It's in Sumner County. It's across the state line. However, because the statute was adopted, I'm sorry? Cross County. What did I say? Well, see, that's wrong. It's a cross county line. on there, but because the statute was written in the sense that it established what we call gaming districts. In our part of the state, the gaming district exists of Sedgwick County and Sumner County. And what that statute says is that if you are in the gaming district, essentially means if the casino is in Sumner County and Sedgwick County still gets 1% of that revenue. But, and here's our point, and we think we're solid on this statutorily, is that when that statute says county, it specifically means the county government. It does not include any other governmental entity. It does not talk about fire districts and saying that you can give the money to that particular governmental entity. It does not talk about townships. It does not talk about water districts. It doesn't talk about any other city that may be affected or have some connection with a casino. It talks about county. And we think that specifically means the county government, Sedgwick County, not any other governmental entity at all. Now, maybe in retrospect, when these statutes were being adopted, someone on the line should have made notion or should have considered the possibility that a fire district may be affected in all of that. And written that into the statute, that if a fire district is located there, they get a piece of the action in themselves, but they did not. They specifically said county, and our interpretation, and we think it's well supported by the wording of the statute itself and the intention of the statute itself, is that it comes to Sedgwick County, and there is no way to move that into another fund without violating state law. Now, the second reason that we get to this is the fact finder said, well, there's services that justify giving that money to the fire district. And essentially the thesis is, well, the county is getting all the money, but somehow the fire district has to go back and service the county, make all these calls to the casino to make sure that there's not that there's no damage or personal injury or anything else, and somehow that just doesn't seem fair on it. Well, the fact finder went astray in her thinking for a couple of different reasons. First of all, why do we cover the casino in the first place? It's not some deal that the county made with the casino or anybody else. It's a deal our fire district made with the city of Mulvane. And it works like this. The city of Mulvane agrees that they will cover the city of Peck for any fires or any structural fires in particular in that city, even though Peck is in Sedgwick County. Mulvane will do it because their fire department is, I assume, in closer proximity to Peck than any other of the stations that the fire district is in. I have to confess I've never been to Peck, so I'm going to assume that, but I think that's the circumstance. In agreement from Mulvane doing that, the fire district said we will go ahead and cover the casino. Now, inherent in what the fact finder came to is that there must be this whole array of services that the fire district is providing to the casino that justifies them getting a large sum of tax money. I had our fire department check on this, and apparently we've only responded to one alarm actually on the Kansas Star Casino itself since 2015. There apparently was a vehicle fire that we put out. In fairness, apparently there were a couple of false alarms, I think exactly two, where after we dispatched a unit, they were called back before they ever got to the casino. But that essentially, other than some inspections where we actually got a fee for it at some point about the alarm system, is we really haven't done much in terms of fire service down to the casino. So if there's assumption that we just, we're working our tails off, the fire district's working their tails off, covering calls down to casino, that simply is not true. But let me divert for a second. And let me stop being a lawyer for a second. Let me be an advocate for the fire district for a second, or a couple of minutes. And let's assume that magically, we end up in a world of unicorns and rainbows, and we can actually legally put casino money into the fire district. Even though legally we think that's not true, let's assume that we end up in that situation. I think we've got some serious problems with that as a notion about how to do this. I think we've got philosophical barriers. Council pointed out that only 20% of the county exists in the fire district. Those are 20% of the people that are not serviced by the city of Wichita and the city of Derby fire department. And as a conclusion on that, it only seems right that all of that 20% that goes to these people ought to go to the fire district. On its surface, there's some flawed reasoning because it assumes that's the only direction that you ever make for county services for people that live outside the city of Wichita and the city of Derby. But look at it this way. I looked at the numbers. The fire district's total budget is just a little more than 4% of what the county's budget is. Even if somehow you said, well, all right, let's do the right thing and maybe match up the casino money with what the percentage budget is for the district and the casino and the budget is for the total county, that still only comes 4%. There's about $1.8 million a year that we get from the casino. So you take 4% of that and it comes roughly to about $80,000. $80,000, if we use that as a benchmark for what could be reasonable, even if it was legal to do this, it doesn't even scratch the surface of what either the bargaining unit is proposing as an increase in this circumstance or what we're proposing. Second thing is there's practical issues. And I think behind the assumption that we can just dip into casino monies and be able to save the fire district from its financial situation now and going into the future implies that there's this big barrel of money sitting down in the basement of the courthouse that's being unused, that we just can't quite figure out how we get this $1.8 million for the casino. Well, I think you know the falsity of that. That money is already committed to other county programs. And here's the philosophical issue, the practical issue involved in it, and I'm glad that I don't have to think about it if I ever existed in a world where we could pour that casino money into other purposes. It's what are you going to cut? Where do you cut that money? Where do you reprioritize that money that we now want to take from the casino and put somewhere else? I think you all are painfully aware of the fact that the sheriff's office, I only use this as an example, that their detention bureau is down about 25% people. And that has been for a number of months. I think our friends from the Eagle Beacon ran articles back last fall that talked about the difficulty we're having filling detention deputy positions over in our jail. Do we cut their salaries? Do we cut their funding? Do we cut ComCare? Do we cut corrections? Do we cut Sheriff's Patrol? You know, if we're going to talk about public safety as a whole, as a goal for what we want to achieve here as a county, and I don't have any quarrel about that being something that ought to be pretty close to the top of the list, what do we cut to do what the bargaining unit wants us to do here? I don't think legally we can do it, but practically as a matter, I don't think that we can justify that on this basis. Council's talk about the comparability with other fire departments. I want to address this just briefly on it, and I want to address it in a couple of different ways. First one, I got a chart here. I want to talk about turnover, because here's the bottom line from my viewpoint. And I understand, you know, I'm not part of the bargaining unit, and I know there's an issue concerning fairness about how you might compare with anybody else. But bottom line is that I'd want to know, as somebody sitting on the outside, what does our present compensation system, how does that result in terms of manpower with the district itself? Are people fleeing our fire district to take better paying jobs elsewhere because they can get more money? And I asked the fire department and human resources to put this together, and they've looked at the firefighter turnover from 2010 to 2015. The voluntary turnovers we can see from a year-to-year basis doesn't support the notion that we're giving people that are just fleeing these jobs to go somewhere else. Even the retirement figures are not high enough, but even if you want to take retirement figures into place, and I know they went up in 2015, if we have firefighters that are sticking around long enough for retirement, then those jobs are being filled and they're not going somewhere else because they think there's a greater opportunity. That's only on the firefighter proportion. The lieutenant portion of the fire district, we look through that, and we've had no voluntary turnover from 2010 to 2015. Now, this doesn't solve the argument. We want to be fair. We want a motivated fire department and everything else, but it's got to be included as one point to this equation is what is happening are we creating a problem that we're not able to fill vital positions in our fire department because we're so low paid. And also parenthetically, yesterday I wanted to check with human resources in the fire department. What does 2016 look like? They said we've had no resignations in 2016 on any of these positions. So in that structure, in that sense, there must be a good reason people are keeping around. I also want to talk about one other thing on compensation. I'm going to run through this very quickly because I think my time perhaps is getting a little short. This concerns insurance. And we presented this to the fact finder, and she pretty much dismissed this. And because we have a better insurance package program here in Sedgwick County than do other comparable fire departments. For example, I'm told by human resources here that the higher percentage of basic health, Sedgwick County covers 95%, Wichita 92.5%, and Overland Park 79%. So we, as an employer, pay more of the insurance package than some of these surrounding governmental entities. Got it. We also cover 80% of dental coverage. If you got kids, you understand how important dental coverage is. We cover 80% of that. City of Wichita, 0%. Overland Park, 25%. And what we did is we applied some numbers to see what is the effect of this. What does this do in terms of this presumption that we are so much lower than other comparable fire departments? And we went through and looked at the pay plan average salary and how we came to an average salary as we took this step program, the 12 or 14 steps, I forget how many we have, took the people in the middle, compared this, and looked at the basic average salary for all of these, and you can compare it here. We're basically, if you look at the firefighter, 50,000, City of Wichita, we're at 48 in Sedgwick County and 47 in Overland Park, Kansas. And then we added in the insurance coverage. The superior insurance coverage we have, we came out to these numbers. And again, I will just use as a reference for time's sake, the basic total compensation of firefighters is we compare very favorably to the City of Wichita, and we're actually above Overland Park, Kansas. Now, this doesn't end the conversation. Insurance is the only thing you talk about. But I would suggest to you, and it'll be pointed out, I think, in the rest of the conversation, there are a lot of fringe benefits that firefighters have. But why do I want to focus in on insurance? And this is why, because it is the most important. Ask anybody in human resources when somebody walks through the first door. The first thing they're going to ask is, how much does this job pay? And the second thing they're going to ask is, tell me about your health insurance coverage, because that's vital to me. I got a family. And it makes a difference when you look at these figures, because if you look at the base salary of firefighters for any one of these three departments and then add in the employer's portion of the health insurance benefits, essentially we're getting about 30%. That comes to about 30% of what the base compensation is for the firefighters themselves. You cannot make, I think, an informed judgment about comparability on any employer with any other employer, whether it's a governmental entity or firefighters or anybody else, unless you take a look at the relative insurance packages involved. The fact finder pretty much dismissed this as insignificant. I'm going to suggest to you it is not insignificant. It is actually very significant. Now, what is the ultimate effect of all of this? What I'm proposing, and understand I own this proposal. I'm the one for the representative of the fire district, and it is my invention or design to try to get this done. Yeah, I've talked to budget and everybody else, but my goal on this thing is, first of all, try to buy peace among the parties involved in it, but the other thing is to try to buy solvency for the fire district. There's going to be some tough choices the people sitting in the seats that you're in right now, whether it's you or somebody else, going to have to make about how we're going to make this fire district viable in the future. Essentially, by proposing what we're proposing here, becomes a difference between whether we have 2 or 3 years to solve these problems or whether we're buying 4 or 5 years to solve these problems. And that essentially is all I'm going for. I've litigated a lot of cases. A lot of you guys know me to do this. That's pretty much what I do for the county other than this. And I'm always involved in negotiations and mediations, and I'm wedded to the notion that the right figure is when nobody is made happy. I don't think anybody's going to be made happy with what I've suggested to try to solve this problem for the fire district. But at least we bought time to come up with some more solutions. And if we don't buy that time, I think we're going to be seeing a disaster one way or the other sometime in the future. That's essentially my presentation. I'm certainly open for my 15 minutes of question. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much. That was a good amount of information for us to digest. We're going to move on to the next point in our hearing. So you have a break. Actually, you don't have a break. You're up right now, aren't you? We have 15 minutes worth of questions and answers for you. So we're going to go ahead and start that now. And I ask the commissioners for questions. Commissioner Ranzau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mike, these negotiations have been going on, I think Ms. Bukaty said, since last year. And although we're talking about pay right here, there was a number of other things that we've discussed throughout this time. Is that correct?
Yes. I probably couldn't go through a complete laundry list, but I'm aware of some of them, yes.
Well, one of the things that the district asked for was pay for performance. Is that correct? And then they were willing to give that up as a concession?
My understanding, and it was before my involvement in it, I'm probably going to hedge some of my answers in that regard. It was suggested to go to the same kind of pay for performance that other county employees are under. The bargaining unit does not want that, and that's fine. Once that point was made, I think they moved off of that as a point of negotiation.
And I think there's also been some discussion about clarifying the part-time language. I think the district would like to ensure that it has that flexibility to use that to help actually help with financial forecast, but that has been rejected from
Yeah,
as well, and the district made that concession as well. Is that true?
Yeah, it is true. Apparently, there was some desire by the district to at least clarify that part-time employees were an option to fill in vacancies and overtime vacations and that kind of thing. The language was not changed, so I think it's not entirely clear language, but the district basically walked away from trying to impose something more severe in that regard.
And by my count, I think the district has made 4 different proposals that's been rejected by the bargaining unit.
I couldn't tell you the number, honestly. A lot of that was before my involvement. We proposed something at the fact finder, which is where, in the process where I get involved in it. We also proposed one in a negotiating session a couple of weeks ago. 2 in my
3 previous ones that I think you or somebody listed. Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to.
It may have been 4 or 5.
It may have been. I honestly couldn't tell you, and I don't want to speculate
Now,
if I can avoid it.
Can you go back to that slide where you had your proposal for? Well, it showed the forecast
Right there?
right there. So even with the recommendation that you made, we're going to be, is that 500 in 2018? 645,000 in the red. So even with your proposal, we're not solving any issue as far as the solvency issue. Correct.
I would agree with that. Again, and I don't want to beat a horse that I've already beaten. I'm essentially trying to buy time on this. Again, whether we've got 2 or 3 years to solve the problem or whether we have 4 or 5 years to solve the problem. Yes, under the projections that budget has put for me together on this proposal, and again, I own this.
Right.
So any criticism is right between my eyes. We're still going to be 645,000 revenues under expenditures in 2018.
So we're basically, with that proposal, kicking the can down the road, and we'd expect to be back at the same point that we are here now.
If we don't find a way to resolve it before then.
Resolve that.
And again, there's a couple of ways of looking at it, and I know I'm getting beyond your question a little bit. We can give the bargaining unit what they want and hope our assumptions are incorrect. Maybe property tax values will go back up as they did for a number of years. Maybe our insurance costs will be more modest. Maybe there is some other adjustment that we can make in terms of, and I hope it's not a situation of, cutting personnel or whatever to pay raises or whatever. Maybe we can find some solution on it. But I suppose my point of it is, as plaintiff as this may sound, is if we're wrong, if all of these assumptions are not going to turn around and make things better, we really are looking, I believe, at a disaster 4 or 5 years down the road.
Now, you had another slide that showed the ending balances, I think, for 5 years. Now, you said that somebody recommended that we have 2 months' worth of expenditures in reserve.
Yes, there's a governmental accounting organization, and that's apparently kind of an industry standard, I guess.
So what number is that it should be? Is it about 1.5 million? That's kind of what I came with.
That would be roughly. Right now, we've got reserves. The last year we've had reserve. The ending balance we have here is 2.6. We're actually doing a little bit better than that. It would actually be way more than 1.5 because the expenditures, as I remember from my chart, was about 17 million. So 1.5, if that was 1/6, that'd be about 9 million. So it's whatever 1/6 would be of about 17 million. So we're a little bit better than that now, but we don't stay that way.
2.8 million. We should have 2.8 million.
I'll have to take
17 divided by 6 is 2.8 million. Because the concern is if you get, obviously it doesn't have to be right at 2.6. You can be at 2.8. You can be down a little bit, but if you get too close, then you can't even pay your bills and operate necessarily. Is that the theory?
Well, that's part of the theory. You always want to reserve to pay your bills, and we're on a cash basis system, as here in Kansas. The other one is, what do you have if there's a sudden unexpected thing? Suppose we have 2 trucks that are several $100,000 is what they cost, go down at the same time, or we have a problem with the radios or something else. You have to have a reserve available to take care of those kind of problems.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, other commissioners' comments or questions? I guess I have a few. Just wanted to give you a chance to be, I guess, crystal clear. What are the things that the fact finder found that you would say are not supported by facts or the law? In other words, the fact finder said we can do certain things. You mentioned the casino money, and I think I got that one. Is there anything else they talked about?
Well, in fairness to the fact finder, and you know, she's a highly qualified individual, and I think was attentive to everything on it. But my interpretation of her fact-finding result was not saying, gee, I find legally that casino money can be used for, but she basically said, I think the parties need to explore the legality of whether casino monies can be used for a fire district purpose. And that essentially is what we did, and we come to the conclusion that they cannot, period. That is the first thing. The second thing is, I think this emphasis that, you know, the county's getting all the money, the fire district's doing all the work. Clearly, by the fact that we're operating under a mutual aid agreement, I think challenges that assumption. Also, the dismissal of our projections on this by relying upon the budget figures. Again, that gets to the issue about the difference between a forecast and budget. Yeah, we beat our budget most of the time. We ought to be proud of that in the county. But that doesn't mean forecasts are inherently suspect or inherently too conservative. They're midpoints. And I think we're very proud of the way we forecasted in the past, too. Those would be that, plus you get to the issue about discounting the insurance coverage as an element on it. Her report, I don't think, ever even mentions that. There may be some other respects that I would disagree with her on, but those would be the major ones.
Okay. And I noticed that, I think you mentioned that one of the challenges of our revenue stream is that we have annexation that continues. So our base is getting smaller over time.
Yes.
Because we have less people paying in because of annexation.
Right.
I also noticed that the 6 comparisons, there were City of Kansas City, Kansas, Topeka, Wichita, Overland Park. But then you mentioned Johnson County. Johnson County is a county. Do they have a fire district that's a subset of their county, or is
3? They have 3 fire districts. I think it's either 3 or 4, but they have 3 fire districts that are located in different parts of the county.
But I understand that there's again, just as I've been trying to study this, I understand that they've got a provision in the legislation, some legal relief that when they get annexed, that their taxpayer base doesn't get smaller. They're exempted from that.
I have to tell you that's beyond my knowledge on this.
Something I guess for us to understand. Maybe I'll ask that question to both sides, and maybe someone hopefully provide that information to me. But I understand that as our annexation happens, we have less and less taxpayers, but they've got something in the law that was passed a long time ago that when they get annexed, those folks continue to pay into those fire districts.
If that is accurate, and I have to confess, I don't know that it is, sir. I wish I knew that, but apparently they were more.
So I guess I'd like to ask both sides to substantiate that what I've heard, whether that's true or not. And I'll hopefully get that from you later. And along that line, as our fire district essentially shrinks over time because of that annexation, is there any analysis on whether our responsibilities have gone up or down as a result? I mean, over time, we've signed more and more of these aid agreements. So I guess my perspective is we're servicing a larger geographic area, but our tax base is getting smaller, converging pressures on our problem here.
That might be the case. If I can tell you that under these aid agreements, our duties go up much higher than our tax base shrinks. I couldn't give you the numbers on that, honestly. The problem with the tax base, frankly, and I'll speak very frankly on this, is when annexations occur by cities, they generally take the higher tax real estate, the higher ad valorem tax. Nobody is out there trying to annex Oaklawn. We have to cover Oaklawn for the fire service, but nobody's doing that because the tax base doesn't justify the services on it. So that's where the tax base losses that we get from the annexations by cities probably exceeds the real decrease that we have in fewer households or other structures that we have to cover because of the way it's done.
That's a good point. Okay, I'll ask Commissioner Peter John for his questions.
I'm going to venture into probably dangerous territory for me with a legal question. A number of statutes have been thrown out, Counselor. I believe I heard the comment made that 75-43, I think it's 4330, was one of the controlling statutes. You mentioned, I believe, 75-2929, as well as 75-2934. Could you tell me, in your opinion, legally, are there certain controlling statutes that cover this legally, and are they all uniform under the Kansas, under the state law concerning home rule?
Yes. I don't think there's any question that home rule, they're consistent in terms of the implication of home rule. I don't think we can exempt ourselves out of these statutes, if that's the ultimate question.
Well, that was one of the directions I was leading to. I was curious, though, going back, if there is a, what you would define the word for controlling statute out there. Is there a controlling statute for the fire district, in your legal opinion, Counselor?
Only informing the fire district and designating what its taxing authority is and what its spending authority is. It doesn't have a spending authority in terms of an amount, but it does have restrictions on the spending authority in terms of the categories of things it can spend money for.
So would that be the 75-2929 or something?
I think that would be 19-3601 and the succeeding statutes that come after that.
Okay. Another question. My understanding is the Kansas Star Casino is located inside the city of Mulvane. And they've got a rather interesting annexation that got them there, and I'm not going to go down that road too far except to ask, is our agreement with the city of Mulvane and I'm not sure whether it's mutual aid or automatic aid,
Mutual.
any different from our mutual and automatic aid agreement with any of the other municipalities that we have that are outside the boundaries of the fire district?
I would suspect fundamentally it isn't. This one specifically deals with structural fires. They may have aid agreements that deal with other things as well, but I'm going to guess it probably isn't fundamentally different other than specifying the locations and maybe what kind of services are provided in minor respects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Other commissioners, questions?
Could you leave that up?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, or happy to navigate if you want me to. Thank you.
I'm going to just give ourselves a couple of minutes to see if there's any other questions that come up here. I'm going to continue to review information here. Commissioner Norton?
I don't see Chris Cronus or anybody, excuse me, here from finance. Mike, or is Marv here? Is he do you know when the last time was that we raised the mill levy for the fire district? Anybody?
I'll stand up and speak and say I don't know when that was, Mr. Norton. To the best of my knowledge, I don't know if we've ever increased but I don't have the information.
I'm pretty sure we had a very marginal increase years ago in my first terms, and then we've lowered it a couple of times since. But I'd like to have that information because I think that's pertinent to the conversation. I mean, you talk about we have no revenues, we have no revenues. We do have a way to get revenue if we need to. If we say the fire district is that important and that we're out of sync with competitive salaries, there is a way to remedy this. Now, there's never been an appetite with this commission to raise mill levy or taxes, but that is, something we need to consider in this whole conversation. You can swallow hard and not like it, but it is part of the dynamic that we're going to have to talk about. And how long do you go when you never, ever, ever raise a mill levy? I don't know what that is, but we probably need to talk about that as part of this conversation. I see Chris here now.
Yeah. Mr. Cronus, would you come to the microphone real quickly? Just let us know, if in your recollection, when we've raised the mill levy for the fire district. Give us any history that you might have quickly. We're actually at the end of our 15 minutes Q&A, so we're going to wrap this up with this question.
I'm working from memory, and I believe the last increase for the fire district was around 2004. That was to provide funding for the fire station relocation plan. My recollection is that a portion of that increase was subsequently rolled back.
I'd like to ask maybe that you would prepare some type of a report to the commissioners at some point so we can understand that a little bit deeper. We'll get that information from you at a later time.
I'll be happy to.
Very good. All right, we're going to...
If I might, along the way too, consequently to a mill levy, you have to apply that to an appraised value. And it would be nice to also know what the appraised value went up every year, because I certainly don't want to be disingenuous to taxpayers. You can say we didn't raise the mill levy, but they still got a tax increase if their assessed value went up. So we have to think about both of them. If the assessed value is going down on the whole, then maybe to maintain the services we've got, the mill levy has to edge up a little bit. And other times when we're growing the tax base and the assessed valuation, you can lower the mill levy and still have plenty of money to run at the same level. And that's a conversation we need to be having right now, because it's not just about we got no money. Well, we obviously at the present rate, if we have increases, we're going to spend down our reserves. So how do you fill that back up? Well, you either start declining the services, lay off people and close stations, or you look at the revenue sources that we have available to us. I know that's not compatible to a lot of philosophies, but it is certainly something we better consider.
I think it's great to have both halves of the equation when that report comes to us. Thank you very much, Mr. Cronus. We're going to move on now to the rebuttal opportunity for the union attorney, and we would like to afford you 15 minutes to say whatever you'd like to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This response may be somewhat disjointed because I'm going to just try to respond to various things that Mike North said. First of all, we very much dispute these figures here as to the projections for the cost of this wage increase. Our expert, who's a nationally renowned expert, testified that a 2.5% pay increase would cost $263,000. Now, I don't know where they get these figures of $800,000. I mean, that's just nuts. There's no way it costs that kind of money. And that's quite frankly why the fact finder rejected these projections, because they're not realistic and they're not based on actual figures. Also, with regard to the numbers, Mike made a very good presentation. I think he also is a very good lawyer. But I didn't hear him say that the fire district couldn't afford his recommendations. And essentially, the proposal we made today cost the same as his recommendations. So, I mean, I think there's much to do about nothing when it comes to that. This fact finder is no dummy. She's highly respected, as Mike said. I mean, she was the director of the Missouri Division of Labor Standards for 12 years. I mean, she looked at these type of numbers daily. And she analyzed all this evidence after a lengthy 2-day hearing, and quite frankly, she totally discredited this because it's not accurate. We do not believe at all that the modest increase that we've proposed today will result in insolvency. And obviously, the fire district doesn't think so because they've proposed the same numbers. The only difference is they want to do it in a bonus instead of a wage increase. And they want to freeze the steps after reinstating them, which will cause more pay disparity. It's up to you as to whether or not I think you probably should look at the mill levy. We're not asking you to increase the mill levy, but I think it's sound business practice. I didn't realize it had been that long since it had been raised, and that there were decreases after that. I think it's something you should consider. With regard to the negotiations, the parties agreed to all language. The only thing that was in dispute was compensation. The union made over half a dozen proposals for language changes, none of which were accepted. So is it just the fire district that made some proposals? And that's the give and take of negotiations. With regard, really, it appears to be the fire district's position. They really challenged that Kansas City, Northeast Johnson County, and Topeka make more money, or Wichita, but that Overland Park and Wichita don't really make more money because of health insurance. Well, it was testified to by Ms. Kirk, who I believe is your Human Resources Director, that the insurance coverage for Overland Park officers, although they paid more for it, was much, much better than the Sedgwick County Fire District insurance. That there were much lower co-pays, there were much lower out-of-pocket expenses. And every one of these departments has health insurance and pension costs. It isn't just Sedgwick County. The other we obviously disagree with council about the casino money, and it needs to be kept in mind. These are not tax receipts, okay? The casino money is not tax money, and obviously you do have limitations on how you can spend tax receipts. This is casino money. And I submit to you, just as some of your local legislators have said in the paper in the last few days, you can spend that money on anything you want to. And the fact finder never said that the fire district was spending all this time at the casino. They have made calls to the casino. They've made fire responses to the casino. But the point is, Sedgwick County Fire District number 1 is the only Sedgwick County entity that does anything for that casino. And we're not asking that 100% of that revenue be distributed to the fire district. I think it is totally legitimate to apportion some of it under the circumstances. And it is another source of revenue that you are, and it's not committed for subsequent years. And we're not asking you to take all that casino money and give it to the fire, or spend it on the fire district. But I think a percentage of it should be spent on the fire district, which is another way to solve this problem. I really didn't hear the county argue, or the fire district argue very strenuously that their firefighters are underpaid. They are. I mean, you can't seriously dispute that. And when you all take a look at the exhibits that we prepared, and then this survey from the International Association of Firefighters, which was not challenged in any way. I mean, it's really beyond dispute. I mean, the pay scale has not gone up since 2011. And quite frankly, during some of those years, the fire district had pretty decent revenue increases. But again, all we're asking for right now, our only proposal is to take really what the fire district's recommendation is, convert the bonuses to wage increases, which is going to cost you the same in those 2 years, and don't freeze the steps again, because otherwise we're going to be right back in the same dilemma we're in. So they're really, and obviously I didn't have a chance to cost that this morning, but there cannot be a big difference in the cost of those two proposals. There just isn't. And I know Mike well enough to know that he had some meeting with finance before he made that recommendation. So I think the fire district's told you that essentially they can afford the proposal that we put on the table this morning. Also, I mean, in our exhibits are the CAFRs, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports for 2007 through 2015. And, they're just the page showing the scheduled budgetary accounts, budget, and actual budgetary basis. Actually showing what you spent, what you budgeted, you said you were going to spend, what you said you were going to receive, and what you actually took in. And every single year, there was a surplus. For 2014, the surplus was $1,681,000. And you added that to your reserves, which left you reserves of $3,271,000. And the only reason I really point that out, I'm not asking you to dip into reserves. What I'm telling you is these things demonstrate that these numbers are not accurate. They do a good job of budgeting here, but the fact of the matter is the fire district makes money every year. It doesn't lose money. And every time we have negotiations, we hear from the fire district that, they're just about to go out of business, and somehow miraculously they don't. And you got to take care of your firefighters. I mean, that's the bottom line. The bottom line is, it's really beyond dispute that of the 6 largest fire departments in the state, Sedgwick County firefighters are dead last in pay. That's beyond dispute. It's beyond dispute that the pay scale has been frozen since 2011. It's beyond dispute that the proposal we made to you, or to your representatives today, will not significantly close that gap, but at least will not allow it to spread anymore, and hopefully will provide a basis for future revenues, or for future negotiations to hopefully get these guys where they belong. I mean, 2%, we're asking for no wage increase for 2016. We're just saying fix the steps, which is the county's proposal or the fire district's proposal. And for the next 2 years, we're proposing less than the county has asked you to give to the rest of the county employees. These guys are not greedy. And again, they go out there and risk their lives to drop the head. I think it's time that we started recognizing this. And I understand you all haven't been here the whole time that all this has gone on, but you've got obviously enough revenue in your budget, and I feel sincerely that you can tap that casino money in future years. So I don't have anything else. I just wanted to address the things that Mr. North brought out, so I'll stand for questions.
All right, so if you are done with your rebuttal, Mr. Bucady, then
Yes,
we'll
sir.
move on to questions and answers,
Yes.
if that's okay.
Sure.
All right, so Madam Clerk, please start the timer. Commissioner Ranzau?
Could you go, someone put that back to the mill levy increases page there? Yeah, right there. So if you look at the fire district assessed valuation changes of 1.2, 1.8, 0.9% in the last 3 years, does the bargaining unit dispute those numbers?
The increase in valuation, because that's what this chart is. Well, no, but again, that's 85% of your revenue. It's not 100% of your revenue.
No, but it's 85. That's quite a bit.
Yeah, of course, of course.
If we, and that's an average of, well, I think I was told, what was it, 1.34%?
Yeah.
So if our revenues increase 1.34%, how can we afford over a period of time to give raises of 2 and 3%?
Well, first of all, we're not asking for 3, we're asking for 2. And this year, we're not asking for any raise. We're not asking for a wage increase. So if you average 4% over 3 years, what does that come out to? Less than a 1.5% a year? I mean, that's what that average is. We are actually not asking for a wage increase for this year.
But you have to add in what we're giving for, what we'd be giving for the steps as well.
Yeah, but again, the cost of that, I mean, it was testified at the hearing that the cost of that is $58,000. A 1% increase, 2.5% was roughly $260,000. So you figure that's far less than a 1% raise, and again, what's the step? And that is a cost because you have to put people where they belong. But then as it goes on, again, every year, and Mike showed you the retirees. Those retirees are coming off a $60,000 a year salary and being replaced by somebody at $40,000 a year salary.
Okay, but
so over time, that pay scale, and that's one of the things that's wrong with those projections. It tries to exaggerate the cost of the steps. But you're right, there is a cost for the steps in 2016, but it's far less than 2%. Even if we said it was 1%, I don't think it's that high. That's still 5% over 3 years. I suspect, and I apologize, we just made the offer this morning, but I suspect that our offer over 3 years will average about 1.5%.
You have said that there's really no financial difference between your offer of 2% pay increase and 2% bonus.
Well, the one difference, I mean, for 17 and 18, the cost to the fire district is going to be basically the same. There'll be a very small marginal increase in 2018, roughly 0.15% is what that, because you'll be compounding the 2% for 2017.
That would also apply to the step.
Well, I mean, you already got what we're talking about is raising the whole pay matrix each year. So guys will move through the steps unless they're topped out, or if you get 13 years, once you get so far, then you go up every year and a half. So there are guys that don't get any step increases. And of course, your new hires don't get a step increase. Does that answer your question?
No, I understand, but if we implement these step increases, then that will also be compounded the next 7
No, it's
years,
really
and
not.
it doesn't.
I mean, there's an initial cost because you got to move people where they belong. But then you have a combination of things. First of all, your new hires don't get a step increase. And second, and then you also have the people that are,
But if you give them a 2% across the board, they will.
oh yeah, well, they get a 2% raise.
That's what I'm saying.
That's your cost.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I sincerely believe that the big difference between Mike's proposal and ours is they want to make it a bonus. We want it to be a wage increase so it stays with your wages. So even let's speak hypothetically. Let's say things are so bad. Let's say Trump gets elected and he screws the economy up. So we get back here, and I'm just being facetious, but we get back here in 2018 and we're negotiating. And the parties agree, okay, we're going to have to freeze wages. Well, at least the wages they're at will be 4% more than they are today. Do you follow me? But if it's a bonus, the wages don't go up. And again, when you look at these other departments, they're not paying bonuses, they're paying wage increases. The whole KCK fire department wage scale went up 5% this year. Now, we're not asking for that, but I mean, in order to not fall farther behind, we need to do that. I'm not sure I'm answering your question.
No, that's okay. In an effort to help control costs, the district has asked for clarification for the part-time so we can utilize part-time and save some money and perhaps unfree some positions. You've rejected that. Can you tell me what initiative, what efforts the union is willing to consider or propose that would help save money?
Well, okay, number one, I was not the negotiator during negotiations. I did not get involved until they reached impasse. So I do not know what the discussions were about the part-timers. I can tell you that generally all of my union clients are willing to entertain any proposal. They may not agree to it. They may make a counter proposal. But let's say, for example, since we're discussing these things, I'd love to see you send your negotiators back to the table. You want to discuss part-timers, bring it to the table. Bring us a wage proposal that actually gets us a wage increase. We'll discuss anything. Okay? I mean, I think we have a duty to bargain in good faith. And, you know.
Do they have any proposals to bring to the district?
Well, I mean, the only issue that was left was compensation. So,
well, but this whole idea of compensation is goes around the financial solvency of the district, and one way to improve that is to find ways to save money and spend money more efficiently and wisely. And I'm asking is if
well, part of if I understand what you're saying, I mean, a lot of the efficiencies, you know, are management rights. And you know, if the employer wants to come to the table and negotiate for management rights, that's fine. But I mean, it's generally management that makes the decision on equipment, on overtime, and on other things like that. I think this union will listen to anything they want to bring to the table.
I understand, but I'm willing to listen to anything that the union would bring to us, because oftentimes the people actually doing the work, regardless of what department it is, often have the best ideas.
Well, all I can tell you at this point is, since I was not involved in negotiations, I don't know what was discussed.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Commissioner Peter John?
Thank you. Counselor, I'd like to ask you a legal question.
Okay.
If I could.
I'll try to give you a legal answer.
Well, I appreciate that. Mr. North said that KSA 19-3601 and related statutes were the controlling legal authority. Would you agree with that?
Well, I apologize, I don't have it in front of me. I've looked at if that's the fire district statute, the statute creating the fire district, well, of course it controls, but I don't think there's anything in there that addresses one way or another things such as the casino revenue. I will admit that the statute that created the fire district controls. And I don't know, Mike, is it 19? I don't know. I apologize. I didn't look at that statute before today. I've looked at it in the past.
Okay, well, I'm trying to ask, as a layman, non-lawyer, understanding the legal side, because that was kind of my follow-up. If there are other revenue sources available that are in the controlling legal statute, I just wanted to know what they were, and if you had.
I don't think they control other than. I apologize. Other than. Property taxes, I don't think sources of revenue are addressed one way or another. There's nothing in the statute that says you can't. Well, obviously you can have other sources, because 15% of your revenue comes in from other than property tax.
Well, we've got outside agreements for coverage. That was mentioned in terms of we're providing fire service to entities that are outside.
Mutual aid agreements?
No, not mutual aid, but for entities that are not in the fire district but have contracts with
some of the companies.
Large companies. So I think that's where the 15% comes from, Counselor.
I think that's some of it. I'm not sure it's all of it, but yeah, I agree with that. That's some of that revenue.
So that's where that's where I think the rest of that number comes from. Although I see Mr. Cronus in the room, and if I'm wrong in that, I hope he will feel free to come to the microphone and correct me.
The only thing I would point out is that's not mentioned in the statute. There's nothing in that statute about your ability to contract with private corporations. And to me, that further demonstrates that you are free to have other revenue sources besides property tax.
Well, if we are free to do that, to have other revenue sources, my understanding would be that we're underneath the controlling legal authority that Kansas statutes define, and maybe if there's a question on this, in terms of where the controlling legal authority is, sometimes we've gotten an attorney general involved with an AG opinion. I don't know, Counselor, you have an opinion on attorney general opinions?
Well, I mean, I'm not opposed to seeking an attorney general's opinion. They do not have the force of law, but sometimes they do provide guidance. And
I know.
I mean, if what you're asking is would the union and the fire district jointly request an attorney general's opinion, I have talked to my clients, but as a general matter, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Well, I'm just throwing out some legal questions.
Sure. Well, those are good questions.
That I want to get a better understanding here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Peter.
Thank you very much. Other questions? I am curious, Mr. Bucati, do you? And I'm sorry, I've been focused on some aspects of some of the things that have been presented. I'm sorry, I maybe missed some of your questions, some of your answers. Hope I don't repeat anything. But is there any other county or any other district somewhere in the state of Kansas that transfers money from their district to another entity like a fire district? I mean, do we?
Well, and I apologize, but I have not studied the structure of the fire districts in Johnson County. For example, I do not know if the Johnson County Commissioners are also the members of those fire district boards. And, I mean, one thing that does make you at least unique in my, because there's, I believe, 3 fire districts in Johnson County. You have 1 fire district in the county, and the county commissioners also serve as the board. And I'm sorry I can't answer your questions. I could get you the answers, but
well, I'm looking
that was not brought up in the fact findings. And
I understand. I'm looking for evidence to support your contention that we could transfer money from one governing body, in other words, a separate entity, a separate set of books, over to another entity. It would be like us giving money to Missouri or something like that.
Well, to me, it'd be more like giving money to somebody here in Wichita. I mean, I assume that you spend money here in Wichita and you don't spend it all on county employees or county buildings. Again, they're just, the county commission does not, in my opinion, by statute or by any of its local ordinances and resolutions, have any limitation on how it can spend that casino money. There's certainly nothing in the statute creating the casino that in any way limits how you can spend that money.
Well, I'm not trying to, I certainly don't want to argue any points here.
That's all right.
I'm just trying to ask questions and understand.
Sure.
But how many people are inside the fire district? How many people are we servicing inside the fire district?
Population, I don't know. We were told, we were told that it's approximately 20% of the population of the county that's serviced by the fire district. We were told, and I believe you were present when we had the negotiation session here on the second or third floor.
And to me, it's an important point because the number I've heard is 85,000. I'm not sure that's right or wrong. I'd like to, if you dispute that, that's fine. But
I'm sorry, I don't have that number.
So let's say for just for the point, it is 85,000. The comparisons of Topeka, 127,000 people inside the city. So their property tax goes to all city services, including their fire department. But they have a city population of 127,000. Wichita, of course, is 388,000. And so their property taxes go to all city services, including their fire department. It's not a separate thing that they separate. And then
Johnson County Fire District number 1, I don't think has a lot of people. I thought they were around 70,000. I think we reported that to the fact finder. I don't have that exact
Kansas
number.
City, Kansas is 149,000, and Overland Park is 185,000. I guess I'd like to see some comparisons of cities or jurisdictions close to 85,000 and see what comparisons we make between all salary and fringe benefits compared to those other. I mean, to me, it's an important point. I would love to see that. So I'm asking you, if you, again, I know you don't have the data right now. I would ask.
I'll see what I can find. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of a town in Kansas that has 85,000. One other point I didn't mean to mention when Mike mentioned the ability to do a 3-year deal. if he's referring to the Lawrence case, that's about 20 years old. I've read it, but not a long time ago. Lawrence is not covered by the Public Employee Relations Act. So, I mean, whatever that court decision was, it can't be on the statutory section I cited you because they're not covered by that act. I'll see if we can find some cities off the top of my head. I can't think of any city that's very close to that in population. What the fact finders that we had, and we've had two, looked at was the size of the fire department. And Sedgwick County Fire District number 1 is 4th in the state, and we compared the top 6. Okay. So, and 5 and 6 are ahead of us in pay, even though they're smaller departments.
And when you say top 6, that's looking at Sedgwick County as an entity, not the fire district itself as an entity.
No, we was looking at Sedgwick. We were looked at the top 6 in terms of number of firefighters.
Okay.
And the other thing I did want to mention, you know, I'm a native of Kansas City, Kansas. I've lived there a good part of my life. That's not a wealthy community at all, nor is Topeka. And yet they do pay their firefighters substantially more than does this fire district.
All right.
Any other questions?
Well, we're just now at the end of our 15 minutes.
Okay.
And I don't see any lights on. I could probably talk or ask questions for another hour if I had the time, but we limited ourselves on purpose, try to get through this. And
I appreciate your time. And let me say this, too. If there are other questions I can answer or that you'd like information on, if someone with the county or fire district would let me know, we'll do everything we can to get you the information. Sure. And I'm going to leave you our exhibit book if I can, and probably just leave it with Eric, and so you people can have it.
Yeah, I've seen information today I've never seen before today, so I would like to have access to peruse that information. These slides plus any exhibits that you might have, I think it'd be good for us to have access to those.
Okay.
Commissioner Ranzau?
I do have one question that Dowdy maybe you gave us on that. The expert's report that you said was different than ours as far as the cost. I'd like to know what the turnover rate was that your expert assumed in that report.
On the wage increase cost?
Yeah, because you're saying that if someone leaves with 60,000 and replaced with a 40, well, that has to assume some sort of turnover rate. We have a very low turnover rate.
Yeah,
Close, so.
I may even get you the transcript of his testimony. But my recollection of what he testified to was that basically he took the payroll and increased it, and with the 30% roll-ups that Mike talked about for Social Security and everything else, and that figure came out for 2.5%, came to $263,000, I believe. So our proposal would actually be less than that. And I'll be happy to not only get you the exhibits, I'll get Eric a copy of his testimony so you can read it.
With that, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Very, very good. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing for the for Fire District number 1 and IAFF Union Local number 2612 regarding contract negotiations for memorandum of agreement. And I will make a motion that we receive and file.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions before we vote? Seeing none. Madam Clerk, please call the vote.
Commissioner Unruh.
Aye.
Commissioner Norton. Commissioner Peterjohn.
Aye.
Commissioner Ranzau.
Aye.
Chairman Howell.
Aye. And with that, let me just say that I still have questions in my mind. I'm sure we probably all do. So I would ask us to take some time to review this information, talk to firefighters, talk to people on both sides of this, try to get answers to our questions. We do need to get back together at some point. And with that, the next meetings we have scheduled naturally would be May the 18th. I think that's too soon for us to get together. I would propose probably June the 1st, more than likely June the 8th is probably the time we'll put this back on the agenda. And I don't need to make a motion right now, but I would just simply say to the room and to staff and my colleagues that I guess it's my intention we probably would have this back on the agenda probably on June the 8th for the county for the governing board to consider any next actions in terms of trying to resolve this impasse. So with that, any questions before I adjourn the fire district meeting? Any comments from commissioners before we adjourn the fire district meeting? All right, then I'm going to go ahead and adjourn the governing board for the Sedgwick County Fire District number 1, and we're going to call back to order the regular Board of County Commission meeting. And we have a couple of items left on that agenda we're going to go and address right now. thank you for everybody for being here.
Thank you.
You bet. I don't know if we don't have a need for an executive session, but I would ask commissioners if they have any comments for other before we adjourn. It's been a long meeting, so hopefully not too long. All right. Commissioners, I see no comments for other. Mr. Manager, anything else to come before the board?
No, there's nothing else.
All right. I don't think we have anything else, Mr. Counselor. Commissioners, anything else before we adjourn? All right, last call. We are adjourned.